opportunities, internships. Anybody get $1 million to start a business? Venture capital? Maybe towards the end of the semester, we'll talk about potential ways to get funding for, if you really are trying to start your business and being serious about it. I operate a venture capital firm, so usually I work with startups, but I know a lot of other venture capitalists that could potentially help you out if you have a solid business plan, hopefully by the end of this semester. So we can talk about that later in the semester. We got a few more objectives to be presented. Who was left out? We got 1, 2, somebody's missing. Oh, 3, 4. Okay, we will, maybe we will start off with those objectives. So we'll start off with those objectives and we'll move into constraint management. We'll look at some factors that can create bottlenecks, and we'll maybe discuss potential bottlenecks that we could have with our organizations. But one thing I wanted to ask with our projects is that I know that we are sort of theoretically putting them together in some way, but I would like for each one of you to reach out to an organization that's doing something very similar to what you're doing, right? And see what kind of information you can extract so you can have good competitive information, right? So if you could get maybe, talk to whoever you can speak with there, a manager, a leader, the owner, maybe some bakery, right? A barbershop, and they could discuss some of their operations, if they can help you get maybe income statements, anything that you can extract. I don't expect you to get everything from an individual. But I want you to have good competitor information to someone who is doing something really close to what you're doing, right? So we can sort of reference and compare to what's actually out there in the market versus our hypothetical organizations that we're going to produce. Do we think it's possible? Is that feasible? Anybody would have an issue getting that information? It shouldn't be that hard. I think you go on Etsy or something like that, right? Maybe go on Etsy or something. If you have issues, let me know. Maybe I could direct you in the right area. All right, so before we begin constraint management, continue with that, let's get some more objectives up here. We'll start from the left-hand side. Would you like to come up and talk about your objectives? And if you need to use the projector, by all means.
Yeah, so for my business, it's actually just a church. So since I want to be a pastor, there's a lot of business roles that also happen at the church.
So you're the only not-for-profit organization
right
in the class, okay.
Our biggest project objective is to update our current facilities to eliminate any future catastrophes. And our hope is to do this within the next 10 years. This will achieve a lasting foundation for our church to provide services and share the word. We estimate the cost to be around $2 million. Our facilities are aging, and so we'll have to update those.
So your plan is to purchase a pre-existing structure or build something, develop something from the ground up in terms of the church?
I guess I'm taking it from the view that I'm starting with a pre-existing structure that we already own. So
okay, so that pre-existing structure you already own. Not-for-profit, could you tell the class what's the difference between not-for-profit and for-profit?
Yeah, so I think we'd be a 501c3 is our tax code, and so doing that, when we, so I guess you could say our product, is like worship services, or any like community events that we hold. And so obviously we're doing all that for free, so, we're not looking to make a profit off of it. But we do, collect donations, from members. And so, any money that we, receive from that, is tax exempt, and really just goes right back into, providing the building, that we use, and, the energy, and paying any of our, employees, such as the pastor or the secretary, and.
Just to stop you for a second, so you understand what's the difference between for-profit and not-for-profit? Who could tell me the major difference? What's the primary difference financially? Yes?
One's tax exempt.
Yeah, we know that one's tax exempt, but what can a not do? What can a not-for-profit, right, barred from doing different than a for-profit organization? Right, you have to think there has to be like a trade-off, right? You're saving the tax money, but what can you not do? What were we gonna say?
They basically can't make a profit, it needs to go somewhere. They can't hold on to that money.
They can make a profit. They can make billions of dollars. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation makes billions. You can't sell shares or divide the company by shares to be sold. You can't own any shares in a not-for-profit. You can't create shares. Now, with all your for-profit organizations, even barbershop, you say, you know what, hey, I start barbershop, it's worth $50,000, right? But you say, you know what, I'm gonna sell shares. But what do you mean? I'm gonna make shares out of thin air, just like you would with Apple, Amazon, whoever. You say, I'm gonna make 1 million shares from my barbershop on the corner. And I'm gonna sell these shares to raise capital so I can expand my barbershop business, or to start a new barbershop, to buy another barbershop. So I could price these shares at whatever I want to. You'd be like, hey, one share costs $1,000. Who says so? Me. It's a private company, but you can create private shares. It's not listed on an index like a stock exchange, right? It's public shares, right? So you can create your own private shares. It'd be a lemonade stand. You could sell a share, $100 per share, and have a million lemonade stands, so you raise enough capital. But with not-for-profit business, you're saying, you know, in essence, you limit the growth potential of raising capital through dividing the property, selling it off, like you say, one of you said, I wanna be bought off, right? You can't do that, right? But you say, well, the great thing is, you're saving taxes, right? So you're not being taxed on a ton of stuff. My foundation is not for profit, so I'm not taxed on things I purchase, real estate, any of the stuff. But at the same time, you're like, well, how do you make money, right? You say you have to either raise donations, campaigns, or things like that, running programs, or you still can sell, right? It doesn't limit to you selling things. You can sell items in the church, right?
Yeah.
Crosses, Bibles, pamphlets, all sorts of things, but you can never sell off part of that business to an owner. You can never divide it into 1 million shares. So there's trade-offs. So that's something to think about too in the future, because a lot of people think, hey, not-for-profits don't make business. They actually can make a ton, you know, if done right. Because if you're like, hey, it's a really big burden to have to pay $1 million in taxes on the real estate, right? If I'm a for-profit business, you're like, that hurts my bottom line. So depending on what you're trying to operate and do, it could be highly beneficial, because you still can sell a ton of stuff, right, without the taxes, right? So churches, most churches, if not all, but close to most, are not-for-profit organizations. Concordia University, when you go look for universities, you say, am I going to a not-for-profit institution or a for-profit school? University of Phoenix, versus Concordia University, right? One actually is owned by a parent company on the New York Stock Exchange. You could buy shares in that company that owns University of Phoenix. But Concordia University does not have that capability. But they say, wonderful, we wanna have this because we don't have to pay, what would this cost in taxes a year in River Forest, Illinois, on this gigantic structure, right? Like, this makes more sense. So think about that. Teach a Dominican, not-for-profit institution, right? Lots of not-for-profit institutions, churches, all sorts of things. So it can go both ways, highly beneficial, but one, you could create shares, and don't forget about that. With your organizations, you're thinking like, how do I actually raise money? Go into the bank, right? You're like, okay, I have bad credits, the bank's not an option. You borrow some money from people you know, or you can create shares and try to sell those shares to very wealthy people who says, hey, I have a ton of investments, but I want different investments. I want to invest in startup companies who I believe in. Here's the money. The same happened with Facebook, right? Same happened with Facebook. Initial shares of some of those people who no longer exist as owners, they wanted their cut from their shares at the beginning. They offered a lot of money, right? So when it blew up, they made billions of dollars. So something just to consider on how to raise money, but maybe we could talk about that later, a little bit later in the semester. Oh, I'm sorry to cut you off, I just kind of want to make that distinguish between not-for-profit, for-profit.
Yeah, so then some of our like deliverable items are, obviously like updating, our like HVAC, air conditioning, machine, and, also, increasing our like fire safety and security, around the building. And then our biggest one is gonna be reforming our budget. A lot of churches have, some like unnecessary, expenses. And so focusing on the necessary things, would help.
Excellent. All right, so for a church, what is the primary product being sold in your perspective? What is your number one product that you need to sell in order to be a successful church?
Yeah, it'd probably be like worship services.
Worship services, so congregation, you need
Yeah,
human members,
Yeah.
right? Who want to have the desire to contribute to the mission
Yeah.
of the church, right? And so your main focus on is how do you still keep people engaged? It's not as easy as it sounds, regardless of if you are part of the denomination, right? Because
yeah, so it's not really, like, I'm not focused on, you know, what we're saying, but
Yeah.
more of like the building itself and.
yeah, so you say, for you, your main concern is to have a good, efficiently operated structure.
Right, yeah.
Creates the demand to have a larger congregation, a more engaged congregation.
Yeah, and, yeah, also like having that structure, means that there'll be, I guess, opportunities for like continued use that, like right now, so I'm basing this off of my home church,
Which is located where?
in Iowa City, Iowa.
Okay.
And, like our pastor came in and he found that, a lot of our, like, facilities were running down, and, you know, was worried about, like, the church, it had asbestos in it, and, you can't run that for like 10 more years otherwise, you know. And so, yeah, having that, I guess, preventative, maintenance.
Now, is the current church successful in keeping its members and keeping donations to keep the facilities operated well?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
So yeah, part of the, I guess, one of the milestones is to have a lot of, like member engagement, and, he held a lot of, I guess, like voters meetings, about why this should be done, and here's what we can do, what needs to happen. And get everyone on board with,
Gotcha.
um,
With the objectives.
yeah,
Alright, excellent. I think, okay, so, the facilities is the main concern, right? The constraints are, is it financial? Like, is enough to bring things back up to, you know, a standard before you say 10 years pass or something?
Yeah.
So-
yeah, sort of what we talked about earlier, yeah, being a nonprofit, we do have sort of a limitation of our ability to raise capital.
Yeah.
I do know there are like church, organizational funds,
Mhm.
like we worked with an outside agency that helped us.
Alright, good. So yeah, I say, hey, focus on fundraising of some sort, maybe since you're very familiar with the operations of like, what programs do you think the congregation would demand?
Yeah.
Use, right, related to the facilities, increasing the facilities and making it better? Grants, government things, it's, you know, maybe focus on other alternative means to raising capital, but there's a ton of grants for churches. They, did a lot of, revision for legislation to offer churches a lot more funding in the last like 10 years. But no, excellent. Alright, thank you. Alright, next up, who we got, our jury? Latin influence jury, correct?
Yeah. I didn't really look into the financials.
Maybe you could bring, an example of some jury that you're gonna be making to the class.
The overall goal is to celebrate the Latin heritage and introduce unique pieces to the current jewelry landscape. I'd start by creating a website. Starting online would be more cheaper for me. And really obtaining my selling permits, because you can do that under
So you need selling permits for online retailing, okay. So the permit will come from like the state of Illinois, okay.
As of right now, it says they're free, but I'm not sure. Depends if I wanna be an LLC.
Yes.
Looking for a reliable and ethical supplier or an artisan to create unique pieces and using sustainable and eco-friendly packaging.
So your supplier going to be creating most of the jewelry and you just assemble it? Are they just making like little bits and pieces and you're like the final, you do the final assemblage, kind of like, what's the jewelry store I'm thinking of? Pandora? Okay, so it's almost like a Pandora kind of business. You take all these different various parts, you put it together and make something unique to sell. Okay.
So the idea would be to have a release of a new collection every 2 months that has a story or meaning behind it to make it authentic. Also working with the marketing team that can help me utilize social media to reach more customers, because that's gonna be really important, getting my name out there. Collaborating and partnering with other Latin-inspired jewelry businesses. And designing like pieces that could, according to holidays or celebrations in the heritage.
Oh, yeah. So maybe like holidays,
Cinco de Mayo.
Cinco de Mayo, okay. Alright,
And
alright,
that's-
excellent, alright, thank you. Who's up next?
Alright, so my business is creating my own gym and fitness center. I started this in a different class and now this is kind of just like expanding on it. So for the objectives, it's obviously establishing a fully functional fitness center, that meets the needs of the local community, health and wellness goal. I projected it to cost about $500,000. For the deliverables, completely furnished exercise facility with like free weights, cables and cardio equipment. And I also wanna incorporate like a snack bar that has protein shakes and bars with like also other healthy food options for them, like after they work out. And then, making a website so you can sign up for like the trainers and see what times they're available. For technical requirements, I wanna have new exercise equipment that like nobody else has, so that kinda sets me apart from other gyms. Software for managing memberships, and then creation of a website that incorporates like class scheduling and when you can meet with trainers. For limits, like kind of just finding a building that's big enough that can fit like a lot of equipment, and it's pretty expensive to get into because not really like new equipment's expensive. It might be cheaper to get used ones, but I guess I'll have to figure that out. And then
What could you do about that instead of purchasing outright?
probably renting maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
at least the equipment.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of all I got so far.
Alright, so obviously you work out a lot, go to gyms and
Mm.
stuff, right? What do you think, wanting to break into this business is like the main thing that will stop it from being successful? Like thinking of exports and lifetime fitness and all
I
this.
think it's just like the amount of gyms that there are, and like some of them are so cheap that people just go there because of the cheap price. So I'm gonna have to sell like it almost as an experience, not just like going there to work out, so like I can get members. Cause like I know like Planet Fitness and stuff is literally like $6 or $7 a month only. So if I wanna like make a profit and have a bunch of trainers, I'm gonna need to be able to sell my membership for more than that.
And you think a Planet Fitness can do that cost structure, why? Why do you think they could have it so cheap?
Cause they have good hours, they're open all the time, they have a lot of space and equipment, so,
And then just amount of Planet Fitness,
Yeah.
right?
yeah.
Remember we talked about like economies of scale, they're able to do like the Walmart of basically working out, right? Whereas yours, do you find that yours is gonna be more premium, like you're gonna
Yeah.
charge more than an export or
Yeah.
something of the sort?
Trying to.
Okay. Alright, should be interesting, I'll have to see where it goes.
Cool.
Something you can consider also, like, think of the marketing for like Gold's Gym and LA Fitness. They market themselves as being like of a higher quality. Planet Fitness, their goal is everybody is welcome, but Gold's Gym and LA Fitness and a lot of the higher end gyms, they market themselves as, we are not for the normal person. So they can justify charging you more because that makes you feel more exclusive.
Cool.
Yeah, so think about other things too, you're like, well, geographical location is gonna be extremely important for you, so I would maybe think of area,
Yeah.
right? So in your plan, think of like, where exactly you thinking? Talking downtown Chicago, downtown Park?
Yeah, I think a suburb would be better.
Yeah, so figure out what suburb, that would be, how much space you actually may need, and then break down maybe the membership pricing into what kind of categories you kind of come up with. Alright, cool. Vinyl wrapping, right? Anybody need their car wrapped? Anyone?
So my vinyl wrapping shop will aim to provide the best level of professionalism in terms of providing the best vinyl wrapping services to all vehicles. And all vehicles will be treated with the same amount of care and respect when being worked on. So a couple of like objectives I have is, the aim of the business is to provide various options of vinyl wrapping, ranging from affordable pricing to higher end luxury options. So finding like proper suppliers of vinyl rolls will ensure affordability to our customers. And in terms of like the higher end colors or finishes, colors will be placed upon like request. And we will start off in a customized shop to give a professional look to customers. And the shop will be able to fit around maybe 3 cars in order to have enough space, but not like overpay bills with like space. And as the business grows and schedules start getting booked, that's when like opening new locations will come into place to have that extra space. And finally, having a proper social media marketing as a strategy to pull in customers, showing our work and following trends to gain customer attention.
What have you seen in terms of trends, like that competitors been doing with vinyl wrapping?
There was this one trend where like a lot of like vinyl wrapping TikTokers would do where they put like the wrap over the car and it's just like a transition, so they like slap it on, and like it was getting a lot of likes, a lot of views on different videos. So that was like just one trend. But
So just throw an entire vinyl wrapping on and then start carving it out, like?
no, so it was like they would do like a panel. They would open up like the part of the panel, the vinyl wrap, and then they would act like they would slap it on, and it would transition to like it already.
Oh, okay, it's like as a marketing gig. But in terms of like, hey, my main goal is to provide quality installation of vinyl wrapping to the most people, or I don't need that many people because I'm expensive. Like, what's your sort of niche? Like, you trying to service as many cars as possible in the shortest amount of time? Or you trying to have, since you're talking quality and professionalism, like the highest pedigree of installation, but at a premium price?
Yeah, I think it's more of at a premium price. Like I want to pay for, well, I want people to pay for like the care that I take to the cars. Cause I mean, a lot of the TikTokers I've seen that work on like lower end cars, they usually tend to, you know, speed up the process, try to get it done as fast as possible. With me, I prefer like taking my time on each car. Although like the higher end cars are more of a liability, like you still want to like, respect everybody's car regardless of the price.
Okay. Alright, so the professionalism and quality is really your niche. Alright, a few things to consider, how big the size is gonna be for this, facility that you need. You know, remember we talked about, are you keeping things on hand in terms of customized requests or something like that? But then I also want you to get information from someone else who's doing the vinyl wrapping, so you can see, are they profitable, right? So try to get as much information you can about that, and if they're not profitable, what are they doing wrong? Could you do something different, right? Okay, alright, good job. Alright, so with our companies, they all sound wonderful, right? But we still have to think about operating a successful business, not operating a business, right? We're not in the business of just starting a business for it to fail, which is very common, right? Usually most companies don't make any profit in the first 3 years, right? You're paying off debt, you're trying to figure things out, how things operate, how much things cost. But if done effectively, you could be ahead of the game, right? Because we're saying we're trying to understand process and design. So we'll look at more of that with the theory of constraints, which this chapter is all about. Right, so most of this chapter deals with bottlenecks, and we see bottlenecks in service processes, but we'll look at manufacturing processes as well too. And we'll talk about what constraint management is all about. So we say a constraint is any factor that limits the performance of a system and restricts its output. Remember we say that we described it as throughput, we're talking about individual units being pushed out. If we're talking to church, we're saying, hey, how quickly is the turnover rate for donations for each congregation member? Talking barbershops, how quickly can we get one haircut out, right? But not even time. Time may not be a factor. It could be other things. Hey, my haircuts cost too much. So time is not a factor. It happens to be cost, right? We're looking at things that restrain us from being successful in our performance. Because we say we're always trying to increase our performance, making things better and better, even if it's a Subway sandwich line putting together sandwiches. Right, so we say capacity is the capacity constraint resource whose available capacity limits the organizations to meet the product value. mix or demand fluctuation required by the marketplace. We're looking for here is supply and demand. Do we have enough to supply individuals, right? Are we doing enough to meet demand or exceed demand, right? Can we even create our own demand in some way with new product categories? Could we create new demand? Oh, we just see this with Apple. Apple just released what? Gadget,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, right, the Apple Vision, or whatever the case is. It's like, hey, whole new product category, and that's gonna create whole new demand, maybe from everybody, right? So we say now it might be incorporated into you ordering off Amazon in 10 years, right? It might be incorporated into video games playing outside with the AR experience. Create a whole new, in essence, a whole new marketplace for other things. But with bottlenecks, I want you to take a few minutes to look at a few items of potential constraints. One of them is regulatory constraints. What are some constraints that are regulatory that can impede your business, that can stifle your business? Who could think of regulatory? Who could think of something regulatory that can harm your business, that can slow it down, that could create a bottleneck? We're talking regulatory, what are we thinking here? What sort of thing? Jess?
For many companies, OSHA ends up being a constraint.
Right, okay, so we say regulatory. Things like OSHA, right? Hey, we got our pest control business, but hey, they're violating some codes in terms of waste material. They're dumping the waste off in some place that's illegal, they get fined, we're gonna revoke their license, no longer operate, shut it down, right? What other things you could think of that are regulatory? Not-for-profit business,
I mean, the IRS.
Yeah.
Fill out our-
say the IRS to say, hey, you're purchasing things or even investing in things that kind of violate what not-for-profit business is all about, according to the 501(c) code, right? So we say taxes, right? OSHA, taxes. Things in legislations that may actually stop your business, right? Or slow it down in some way. Some new legislation will come out and be like, that's really gonna affect us. Our next item of bottlenecks. We could think of technological constraints, right? And I want you to, what do you think of technological constraints? Let's think of for your own business, what you're gonna be doing with your business. What could be a technological constraint that can impede your performance, or slow down your performance? How could technology work against you? Yes?
Just like a website being down, not working for the.
All right, you say, hey, website, right? One, it could be down. Two, it could be too expensive, right? Three, you say, hey, my technology is not good enough for good marketing. It stinks. And we think of even beyond that, the psychology of objects, right? And we think of letters, numbers, colors. The psychology of cost, right? How did you structure your cost? You say, oh, okay, what do you mean by that, Professor Ross? We say, oh, okay, $9.99 or $9.99. Like, what's the difference? Right? We say, okay, human beings perceive things to be actually smaller if the actual item is smaller. Right? So how you're even placing things on your website could be an issue. We say, oh, man, my competitor did something creative. What did he do to make a ton more money than I did? He drew a line. You're like, what? He drew a line? Yeah, he drew a line in the $9.99. You didn't. Right? Human beings' perception is that, hey, I need to act urgently. This is a real deal. Colors. Think of when you're doing your logos, right? We're talking pre-workout mix. What color do you think consumers would relate to their pre-workout mix. Microsoft uses blue, why they choose blue? Apple uses white for all of this packing and stuff, why they choose white? How do we perceive white? We perceive white as clean, brand new, right? Sweet, think of all these things even when you come up with your logos and your brands. Don't just pick anything out ordinary. Red. Red is indicative of alertness. That's why when you see things on sale, you put it in red. Pay attention to this. Highlight. So think of things even in that aspect. Another constraint is labor. Right? What could be some labor constraints with your business? What do you think of? What could be some issues?
Even just labor laws and different regulations that are present.
Yeah, okay, labor laws, right, we can think of that, but not even that serious. What could just be honestly within a regular organization, like a labor issue? Your employees, what could be an issue?
Like laziness maybe?
Maybe laziness, but, okay, we say laziness, but think of things like, hey, they're human beings, I gotta give them time off, right? How can I manage my business when Cynthia has to take off for the week, right? Earn time off, paid time off, right? Leave of absence, all the things that you do at your jobs for whoever's working, right? You say, how do your operations are affected on those days? Did you plan well for those things, for those holidays? Do you need more people? Things of that nature. But who else could think of maybe a labor issue with your company? Something dealing with employees, not having enough, having too little, yes?
For my degree, like unintentional mistakes that would end up costing me money.
All right, so we say, hey, I have a labor issue, a labor constraint. I need better training, right? We have to retrain the people we have. It's expensive to just fire people and rehire them, right? So that's not always the solution as a business owner. You usually wanna keep people who's already there, because already know what's going on, right? So you know that there's a cost associated to hiring and firing people. And so you say, hey, mine might be retraining, because we're dealing with a hands-on process, right? Very tactile. So therefore, I need to focus on training. All right, we can think of another bottleneck here, right? One is financial bottleneck. What could be a financial bottleneck for your organization? What's a financial sort of constraint that you can face?
Even just getting the base product can be super expensive for all companies.
All right, you say, just the expense of the main item, right? Expense. Expense for what? You're like, hey, how much am I gonna pay this employee? Like, yeah, I'm gonna hire X amount of people, but if you show me what it's gonna cost for vinyl wrapping, and you say I got 5 guys and they get paid $20 an hour, and it takes 2 hours to do that job, I'm gonna say the math doesn't add up, right? You say, if you say for the barber shop, you say, hey, here's our monthly expense, it's just me in here cutting hair, you say the financials don't add up, right? It just doesn't make sense. So what are you gonna do about it? What are you gonna decrease? Are you gonna decrease your operations in some way? What other expenses can you get rid of, that you could look at? What about for the bakery? What could you think of? An expense issue?
Utilities is gonna be a big one, because especially if you do the 24-hour baking thing, people being there all the time and running ovens gets very expensive very quickly, especially if it's maybe natural gas.
Yeah, you think of, hey, we need to bake and use utilities to create the product, we're running it 24 hours a day, that's probably super expensive. What could we do to mitigate that cost, right? That's a huge cost. Are we sacrificing on the space of the business, going smaller? What are we doing? Are we keeping less employees? What if they have to do something, so I want you to focus on that as well too. All right, then we got physical constraints, actual physical things, external physical things that can hurt our performance. What are some external physical things you can think of that can hurt your performance for your business? I think of things that, what happens outside when you can't make it to the store because it's too, what here in Chicago? Too much snow, right? So we say, hey, climate is an issue, right? Climate could be an issue, right? The weather could be an issue. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do based on different seasons here in Chicago, right? How's my business affected when it's a blizzard outside? How's it affected when it's the wintertime versus the summertime or springtime? What else do you think of physical?
Maybe also just the space of the building that they're in.
Yeah, you say, hey, the physical space is a limitation. We don't have enough space to get 3 cars in here, right? 3 cars would be wonderful because it would make sense for what we're trying to charge and actually have a profit at the end of the day. The other part is location, right? Probably one of the biggest things is location. I used to, when I was in college, I worked for the Blackstone Group, and part of my job was to find physical locations for Starbucks, right? So Starbucks had a lot of research they would do to see what neighborhood they would be in, and where exactly, on what corner, or what area in that neighborhood they would be in, right? And usually it took a lot of research for that, because Starbucks is very, very particular on where they wanted to be located. And it worked, right? Because Starbucks is seen as that wherever there's a Starbucks, typically you perceive it as a good neighborhood, right? So it's an anchor store. It usually changes the real estate in the area or whatnot. So physical location is huge. Decision making, right? Decision constraints. Indecisiveness, right? We're talking about I'm not sure, I'm uncertain, or making a bad decision altogether can create a ton of loss of money and impede the performance of your business. What are some decisions, sort of issues you may have for your business? What can you think of? What are you indecisive about with your business? Yes.
You could have like, too many middlemen or like too long of a staircase to climb for decisions.
Yeah.
Like if you had, like this person talks to this person talks to like that person, it would lead to like customers not wanting to wait like the week it takes to get the answer they need.
Yeah, you can say your subordination structures could be bad. You got 5 people you have to go through before somebody tells you what to do, right? You say really it probably makes more sense to have very competent people who can make decisions right there on the spot, right? A lot of wasted decision. Because if not, the time passed, the customer's like, I'm moving on to something else. You lost money. What are you indecisive about with your companies right now? Who could tell me some indecisiveness? Yes.
What items to carry specifically on a regular basis versus what would be a specialty item?
All right, specialty items versus base items could be a decision thing, and it could go wrong, right? Depending on what you'll learn from experience. What else? Yes.
I said for me, like, equipment, some, like, tools and stuff may be better than others, or like, they have other reviews. Some
Yeah.
reviews are better than others.
Yeah, I mean, your business really deals with skill, right? But you probably can find a lot of people who are skilled, but it really deals with who got the best tools to get those skills implemented in the best way, right? Or the quickest way. So yours is picking tools, and there's a ton of, razors, shavers, clippers to choose from. Okay. You were gonna say in the back?
I was gonna say location, kind of like, what you talked about, like the high rises, like either doing the city or doing the suburbs.
Yeah, you think of like, hey, my major decision is, do I wanna drive around to all these houses and go location, Or do I wanna be in a fixed structure where all I have to do is worry about going up and down an elevator, right? That might be a thing, right? So that can make or break how successful the business is, right? You say, hey, I can get either contract, or maybe that's difficult to get those type of contracts, therefore I may need to go to a suburb, depending on what suburb it is, right? Who needs that demand? Alright. So now we understand what bottlenecks could be. It could be anything that could happen at any point in time. Let's just not to say, long term, right? We're saying short term, when we're thinking of people calling off work. Bottleneck, right? They called off work. Who's gonna do the job today? Who do we have on call? How do we manage that system to get somebody to do it? Suppliers. We're like, hey, they went out of business. They're no longer giving that type of jewelry anymore, right? Did I have a backup plan? Was I not getting everything from one supplier? Was I kind of spreading it out to mitigate my risk, right? So constraints is a theory, right? How we manage business. Because say there's so many factors in it. Yeah, we try to get it down to a science in some way to make it as scientific as possible, depending on what business you have. It's purely theoretical, right? You have to apply it for your specific thing that you're operating with in your business. Right? So that's what we call it, theoretical. But it's a systematic management approach that focuses on actively managing those constraints that impede a firm's progress towards its goal. So we're saying teeter-totter, right? Increasing something if one thing drops, right? Decreasing something if there's too much of something happening over here. So we want to learn on how to restrain those constraints. And so we say, all right, here's our operational measures. I think we may have went through this a little bit, but we're looking at, hey, inventory is big, throughput, right? So we're looking at the rate in which we do haircuts, the rates in which we groom dogs, right? How quickly could we do it? We got a bunch of dogs sitting there barking, and we don't have enough people to cut their hair at a fast enough pace to get them out to what we promised to people. It would be done by 6 o'clock. When they got off work, somebody called off. Now we just lost a whole line of business from that, right? Operating expense. Like we're going in glossy-eyed thinking like, hey, we need all of this stuff to do something simple. Maybe we say not. Maybe we say we just want to have the bare minimum to get the stuff out to begin with, because that might be low risk. And utilization, right? Degree to which you put in a space of work versus currently being used. Right? You have all this space, extra space, and it's not being used. So you're paying rent, or you purchase a large building, and most of the space is kind of pointless. Let's say it's the gym. You have this huge facility of gym, and not enough equipment. So a lot of bare area that could be used for other things. Opportunities for you to sell something else in those spaces, or put more interesting workout things right there, right? How we're utilizing the space is also big. What's our time? What time is it?
10:50 on that.
Okay. All right, we'll continue theory of constraints on Friday, and maybe we'll look at some work breakdown structures for those who got those complete. All right, everyone, have a great day. I'll see you on Friday.